Hi everyone, I'm Jonah Harris, and today I will talk about the joint work of Aviv Zohar and myself that concerns a potential attack on the Lightning Network. Other works that study different attacks on the Lightning Network have mostly discussed how to disrupt the normal operation of the network and how to prevent its users from executing successful payments. The novelty in our work is that it presents a way that can be used to actually steal funds from users on the network. For anyone who is not yet familiar with it, the Lightning Network is a second layer to Bitcoin that aims to solve the scalability problem. It does so by letting its participants make secure transactions with each other without involving the entire Bitcoin network with all these transactions. This is achieved using a concept called payment channels. A payment channel provides a trustless way to transfer money between two participants on the network. It is created by locking funds, in some way that we will discuss shortly, into some contract that can later be extracted in a way that was agreed on by both parties. The main part of the contract is the balance of the locked funds. That means what part of the locked money belong to each side. Now, transferring money can be done by agreeing on a new balance that reallocates the locked funds in another way. The establishment of a channel works as follows. The funder of the channel, the one that deposits money into it, creates a transaction with a special output that can only be spent with another transaction signed by both parties. This output is called the funding output. The transaction with the funding output is published to the Bitcoin network to be included in the blockchain. In addition, the parties will create another transaction called commitment that spends the funding output but will not yet publish it. They will only exchange their signatures of the commitment, so each of them would be able to close the channel by spending the funding output and take his share from the channel without needing the cooperation of the other party. To guarantee the funds that the funder deposits into the channel are safe, the commitment signatures are being exchanged first, and only then the funder will publish the funding transaction. If one party wishes to send funds to the other, all they need to do is agree on a new commitment that will reallocate the funds from the funding output and exchange signatures of that new commitment. The Lightning Network uses the HTLC mechanism to enable routing of payments between participants that do not have a direct open channel between them. An HTLC is a conditional payment over a channel that is subject to the receiver forwarding another payment through one of his other channels. If they can present a proper proof of forwarding the payment, they earn the original payment that was proposed to them. For example, if Alice wishes to send money to Carol and Bob has open channels with both, they can use him to forward the payment. Alice will make a conditional payment to Bob, subject to Bob revealing a secret that only Carol knows. Carol will reveal the secret to Bob once he makes a similar conditional payment to her. HTLC is implemented by adding another output to the commitment that enforces all the different rules of this conditional payment, like who can spend that output, when can it be spent, and what cryptographic proof is needed in order to spend it. As you can see here, every HTLC that was not yet resolved has a corresponding output in the commitment. To enforce the HTLC conditions, in case one of the parties is not responding or even misbehaves, more transactions are created that can spend the HTLC output in different scenarios. The party who initiated the HTLC holds the HTLC timeout transaction that can be used after the HTLC expired. The party who received the HTLC holds the HTLC success transaction that can be used anytime, assuming the required secret is known to the receiver. As the figure suggests, some of these transactions require the signature of both parties, and some of them require only a single signature. That depends on whose party does the published commitment belong to. In fact, each party holds a slightly different version of a commitment, and it's important for the operation of another mechanism that we will not elaborate on, called revocation, that should disincentivize users from publishing older commitments. An interesting case that we examine in this work is the following. Suppose Bob publishes his commitment that contains an incoming unresolved HTLC output. This output can be spent either by Bob using the HTLC success transaction, assuming he has the required secret, or by Alice using her HTLC timeout transaction once the HTLC expires. If for some reason Bob's HTLC success transaction fails to confirm before the HTLC expired, Alice will be able to claim these funds despite the fact that Bob has the required secret and may even forward the payment on another channel. This leads us to our main work, which is the flood and loot attack. In this attack, the attacker will lead to many channels being closed at once. All of them are loaded with many unresolved HTLCs. That would require the victims to publish many transactions to the blockchain if they wish to reclaim their funds. The resulting high congestion will prevent from all of the victims' transactions to be confirmed before the HTLCs expire, and the attacker will claim those outputs once the deadline is passed. We will now go over the different steps of the attack. So the attacker controls two lightning nodes that we denote source and target. The attacker starts by opening payment channels from the source node with all of his potential victims. The attacker is the one initiating the establishment of the channel, which means that he's the one that is funding the channel. In this diagram, we see a direct channel between the victim and the attacker's target node, although this is not necessary for the attack. The target node can be farther away from the victim, and it only needs to have a route from the victim to itself with enough liquidity so it can receive payments. Once all channels are set up, the attacker starts initiating many HTLC payments destined to the target node from the source node, and he routes those payments through each of the victims with whom he opened the channel. The HTLCs all have the same expiration time, so all the attack channels will later be closed at the same time. The attacker will route the maximum possible number of payments through each channel. This maximum number is determined by one of the channel's parameters. At that point, the target node does not yet resolve the HTLC payments it receives. It only adds the HTLCs to its channels, but stalls the return of the secrets for now. After the source node has routed the maximum number of HTLC payments that it can, the target node resolves all these payments by sending back the corresponding secrets. At that moment, the target node receives all of the funds that were sent to it by the source node, and it can gracefully close its channels and walk away with the money. The secrets propagate back to the victims, which will pass them back to the source node and ask him to resolve the HTLCs. The source node, however, ignores any such request and patiently waits until the HTLCs all expire. When the victim fails to gracefully settle the HTLC with the source node and the expiration time is approaching, they will have to unilaterally close the channel by publishing their commitment and claim their funds on the blockchain with HTLC success transactions. If the number of victims is large enough, then not all of these transactions will be successfully confirmed before the HTLC expire. Then the attacker will publish his own HTLC timeout transactions and will claim these funds that really belong to the victims. Remember that these funds were already claimed by the attacker on the target node side. So in the end, the attacker gets to keep some of the money of his victims. After thinking and designing the attack, we went down to actually simulate it on a local test network. We implemented a prototype of an attacker's node based on the C-Lightning implementation. For the victim nodes, we used the LND implementation, which is the most used Lightning implementation today. The attacker, it's important to say, the attacker does not have any mining power and has no control of what transactions miners choose to include in blocks. Of course, the code we used and the full simulation results are all publicly available. Our simulations show that attacking 85 channels already guarantees that the attacker will steal some funds. In fact, every HTLC that was not claimed by a victim before the deadline will surely be claimed by the attacker due to the transaction structure that the protocol defines. The attacker can set his transactions to pay high fees, while the victims cannot do such thing. Not surprisingly, we also see that when less block space is available for victims' transactions, a fewer number of victims is enough for a successful attack. We'll see in a moment how we use that fact to further improve the analysis of the attack. We also wanted to test how easy or hard is it to find that many victims. Well, fortunately, there is a way to test the willingness of users to open a channel without actually locking funds. All we had to do is to send the open channel message defined in the protocol and check if the other peer replies with an accept message. So we used the node on the Lightning mainnet and try to query all the nodes that we heard of through gossip messages with an open channel request. Out of the 4,600 nodes that our node heard of, a little more than 2,000 were active and responding. Out of these nodes, more than 95% answered to our request to open a channel with a positive answer, indicating they could become potential victims in our attack. We also present a technique that can be used to lower the effective number of victims needed for a successful attack. Since the attacker is the one funding the channel with the victim, according to the Lightning Protocol, he's the one to set the fee rate that is paid by the different transactions of the channel, specifically the HTLC success transaction used by the victim. While the channel is open, the attacker can propose a new channel fee rate to match it to the current blockchain fees. Victims will accept a new fee rate proposed by the attacker if it matches their view of blockchain fees. By waiting long enough, the attacker can propose a new reduced fee rate whenever blockchain fees go low, but never propose a higher fee rate when blockchain fees are high. If this strategy is taken for a long enough time, the channel may end up with a fee rate that is substantially lower than fee rates of transactions currently in the mempool. Here we see the results of the fee rate estimation mechanism used by Bitcoin-D, which is used by all major Lightning implementations. As the graph shows, blockchain fees may greatly fluctuate over time. The attacker can use that to lower the channel's fee rate and start the attack at a later time when the channel's fee rate is low and blockchain fees are high. This way, victims' transactions will be less likely to be included in the blockchain before the HTLC expires. Here we see how the strategy affects the attack. The attacker opens the channel and tries to minimize the channel's fee rate for some time before launching the attack. We find the minimal fee rate that the attacker can achieve in that time window and test what portion of the following blocks is available for victims' transactions under that fee rate. For example, the green curve on the left tells us that when trying to reduce the channel's fee rate for 7 days before executing the attack, victims will have more than half a block available for their transactions only in 58% of the time. That means that with 42% probability, it is enough to attack only 41 channels instead of 85, as we've seen before, to guarantee a successful attack. Finally, we propose some mitigation that may help dealing with the attack. Although the vulnerability our attack exploits is inherent to the way HTLC works, there are some steps users can take to lower the potential risk from this attack. For instance, node operators could use more restrictive channel parameters, such as a low value for the maximum number of unresolved HTLCs allowed at any single moment. That would require the attacker to attack a greater number of channels in order to get the same effect. Another option is to close the channel earlier when the other party does not respond. This would give the victim more time in which it can claim the HTLC outputs without competing with the attacker's transactions. Another interesting proposal that could help mitigate the attack is the addition of anchor outputs to the commitment. This new proposal will let victims set the fee paid by their transactions without relying on the channel's fee rate that is set by the attacker. Our full paper includes a few more suggestions and also points out others that may look promising but are actually ill-advised. Thank you all for listening. For more details, we encourage you to read our full paper. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach us. Goodbye.